to Tea with Cecil. I am Cecil Castellucci. Today I am talking with Kate Maruyama. Kate is a delightful and wonderful friend, and she was raised on books and weaned on movies in a small college town in New England by her mother, author Kit Reed, who is also one of my friends and I adore. Kate teaches, writes, cooks, eats in Los Angeles, where she lives with her family and where I hang out with her. Her novel Harrogate was published by 47 North in 2013, and her new novella Family Solstice from Omnium Gatherum was named Best Fiction Book of 2021 by Rue Morgue Magazine. That just happened. Congratulations, Kate.
Thank you.
Her short story, Akiko, is featured in Phantasma Stories, and Crying Wolf is featured in Winter Horror Days. She's got lots of short stories that she does. They've appeared in Asimov's magazine, Arcadia magazine, Stoneboat, Entropy, Gemini, The Rumpus, Duende, among others. And you can find all that on her website. She holds an MFA in creative writing from Antioch University in Los Angeles, where she is now affiliate faculty with the BA program and teaches online classes. Please welcome Kate Maruyama. Hi.
Hi.
How are you?
So good to see you, Cecil. It's been a while.
I know, we were just saying before I hit record that it has been a while. I usually spend Christmas over at Kate's. It's one of my pit stops for Christmas, but this year with Omicron, it was kind of not. It was
not
weird.
on. Yeah.
Okay, so my first question for you, Kate, is: do you have a mug of something with you that you are drinking?
I do. I have a mug in my Shirley Jackson mug. No, I didn't win one, but I was a juror. I have a mug of Sadaf tea, which is a local brand from Glendale, made right here in Glendale. I think they import the tea, and it's a nice Earl Grey, and we're big fans around here. Also because, like, when we go on our daily walk, we walk right by the Sadaf factory. It's a Mediterranean import spice thing.
Nice.
So, yeah.
I am drinking some. I decided to switch it up today, and instead of doing like an Earl Grey or like a mint, I'm doing lemon, ginger, and Manuka honey, and I'm drinking it in my Once Upon a Time children's bookstore. It's America's oldest children's bookstore, and it's not in Pasadena, it's in Montrose.
It's in Glendale. That's a part of Glendale. Yeah, La Crescenta.
Yeah. So cheers to you, my friend. It is so
cheers. It is good to see you virtually. The last time we saw each other, we had like distanced Outback coffee, and it was just when we'd been vaccinated, and it was like a miracle we were seeing people. Sorry.
That is 100% true. Oh, don't worry. This is so casual. It's true. And I was saying, before I get to my first question, I was saying that one of the reasons why I started Tea with Cecil is because when Omicron hit, I was feeling like, oh no, we're going to go back into some kind of lockdown, and I've been alone, and it was just like too much. And I felt like it's too hard to do like a Zoom gathering. And so I decided that I was going to like talk one-on-one with my creative friends, but to also cultivate my friend garden, because it's kind of weedy right now because of the pandemic. And I also thought that, your mom, Kit Reed, who is a fabulous author, who I loved very dearly, her big thing was talking about being a good art citizen, a good literary citizen. And I felt like doing this and talking about creativity and process with friends and sort of sharing it publicly was a way for me to be a good art citizen, a literary citizen, to sort of share who I love and whose brains I love to engage with. So there you go.
I'm very glad it's here. I just listened to you talk with Cherie, which was really lovely, and just definitely food. We haven't been talking to each other as much. I mean, all of us creatively, it's a rare thing. And at least have it so good. We'd run into each other out at like readings or bookstores and have the most amazing creative conversations all the time. And I'm glad you're finding a way to sort of fill that hole for sure.
Yeah, well, thank you. I'm so excited to be talking with you. Okay, next question. Question number 2. Who are you, Kate? And how do we know each other?
That existential question. It's like,
It can be,
who am I?
you
Who
can
am
answer
I?
it however you want. But I feel like if I missed something in your bio, or if it's a chance for you to tell us who you are.
Well, I'm a writer and a teacher, and I live in Los Angeles, and I like food. And I'm just very lucky to live here as a writer. I think we live in the best city in the world for it. People are all very supportive and kind, and there's just a really nice community, like a Venn diagram community, different pockets of people, and everyone seems to be, it's just a really nice scene, very supportive and mellow. Oh, and I'm a friend of Cecil Castellucci.
And your newsletter, you do always include a recipe in your
Yes.
In your newsletter, which I love. And I think is very comforting. It's like that's such a comforting part of your newsletter.
Well, they said to do something that you do all the time and is easy for you to do. So I was like, what do? I read, I write, and I cook. And so it's called Read, Write, Cook. And so there's a writing exercise in there because I teach writing. And there's a book that I've read that I'm excited about, and always a recipe each month, and sort of like trying to make it not too fussy and kind of like simple to do. So it's a nice thing to send to people, because that's like something I can like give people, especially since I'm so used to having people over and baking for them and things, and I can't do that right now. So yeah, it's nice to have that in there.
Yeah. And how do we know each other? I was trying to think of that.
Oh, I know this. That
Okay.
was one thing I was like, aha.
Is it through, I mean, in my mind, it's through your mom, but
Well, it's through, yeah, no, but there's a reason. Yeah. So I met you first at Stories Cafe, and I was there with Sochi Julissa Bermejo, and I was there with Ben Lurie. And so it was because of Ben, but then he knows me because of my mom, and so he brought her up, and so I arranged this like tea where you would come over and hang out with Ben and my mom, and like we would all talk. But you and I ended up like hitting it off that day. It was in my house, and like talking so much, my mom was like, I hope you and Cecil had a nice play date.
I love,
because we like started talking, and everything was like, I was like, yes, you know, I knew exactly.
Was that the time that your mom she had these little books that she had drawn when she was like like during the war or something like that, and she had like drawn these little like in this little sketchbook or in this little notebook that she had?
Yeah, I'm not sure. There was all sorts of stuffer from the house around. There's always stuff around when she was visiting. So yeah.
That's right. It was with Ben. I should ask Ben to come here. Ben will come here, I'm sure, one day. Yes, that is how we know each other. And then you and I did have a nice play date, and then became friends.
Yeah. And then I have to say, I think that play date was like in the summer of 2013, and then my book came out in September, and you showed up to my launch, and I was like, that is a good egg. I think people who show up for people when something's happening, even if they don't know them so well, that was really, I was like, all right, this one's a keeper.
Yeah. And I mean, it is hard sometimes to show up, but I think it is like important to show up when you can. And if you can't show up in one way, to like sort of show up in other ways, especially for artists, because it's so, hard to figure out how to, like, a lot of times people are like, well, what can I do? And it's like, okay, yeah, you came to one signing, that's great, but a career like that, there are other ways that you can show up for people, like if you can't physically show up.
Well, and I thought it was just very kind of you, because it was my very first book, and you were like so super published, and I just met you, and you came, and it was a friend's backyard, and it was a party.
Oh, that was a good one. Oh yeah.
Yeah, that was a good one.
It was a good one. Yeah.
My friend Louise played flamenco guitar, and we had like snacks and wine, and yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah, for sure. Yeah. It was like, yeah, that was a good one. Okay. Let's talk about your novella that just came out.
So I have, I'm not good with the camera, like it's a spatial relations things. Family Solstice came out from Omnium Gatherum, actually in January of 2021, so in the midst of the pandemic. And I was really lucky to have Cecil Castellucci host my very unusual book launch.
Yeah, that was super fun. But it's Family Solstice is such a good book. It's like this sort of like creeping family horror, sort of the secrets we keep and stuff like that. And it was really tender in its monstrousness, I thought.
Thank you. Yeah, it's set in the house where I grew up. The family is nothing like my family, but I really dug into that house because it had been pretty well destroyed after my mom passed. There was a pipe burst in the attic, and then all of this water came down in the walls, knocked out the furnace, and then the flood started. And basically the person who stepped in the house said there was a waterfall coming down the front stairwell. And the photos in that really wrecked me. And I think I was just trying to write around it for a couple of years, and I tried a ghost story and stuff. And then this story came to me, and it was like kind of perfect for that.
Yeah, no, I can totally see how those two things would come together. And yeah, and your book launch, speaking of book launches, your book launch for that was super fun. Can you talk a little bit about the special book launch that you did?
The book was published by Omnium Gatherum, which is a woman-run independent press run by Kate Jones. And Kate Jones had created in a Second Life version kind of a world for her entire publishing company. And so every book had its own house or space. And my husband, Co, who knew that house very, very well, created a 3D version of the house that I grew up in so that we could hold the launch there. And so while it wasn't totally exactly the same, you know, Kate furnished it and she hadn't been there, but the space was very similar. The color of the kitchen was totally the same. So it was really trippy and kind of wonderful to welcome just a few friends into this world, walk them around the house and give them a tour, and then go to the kitchen where a large part of the action of the book takes place to have readings. And so Cecil hosted, which was really great. You hosted. Am I supposed to use second person here? I don't know. And I had some readers as well. And it was just a really nice party. It was a time when there was a huge surge, so none of us were going out. And so it was really fun to sort of like gather in this virtual world. And we couldn't figure out the clap button. And so we all just started jumping. And so what was great is when someone was introduced, everybody in the room would virtually, their avatars would jump up and down. And it was just a really unique, like wacky space. I had a lot of fun that night.
Yeah, and it was kind of funny too, because it was like, no, you couldn't party. I mean, you know, it's like nobody was partying at that time. And there we were at a party in a house, and it was exactly what always happens in a party. Everybody's in the kitchen.
Everybody's in the kitchen, right? And then we had people, I had one friend, Dale, who came in as a koala bear and couldn't get up the front steps. And like Co had to go out and coach them into the house. And yeah, it was very funny. I had another friend who got stuck in the basement, and it was just, I think the best kind of party is where everybody feels so awkward that you're just laughing and sort of trying to work your way through it.
No, that was a really, you know, nice way of connecting during that lonely, terrible time that we're still kind of in.
That we're still kind of in.
Yeah, that we're still kind of in. It's a little bit, we manage it a little better now, but
yeah, I think we see each other and like know that like waving and seeing each other behind masks is important now. I think that's something that we hadn't mastered.
Yeah. Then. Oh yeah. Agreed. Totally. Okay. Next question. We already talked about what just came out, Family Solstice, which won the Rue Morgue.
They named it the best fiction book, which was astonishing to me. I mean, there was so much good horror that year of 2021. It was just nuts.
Okay, so we just talked about that. So what are you working on now? And you don't have to specifically say like, let me tell you what my idea is. That is still a baby.
Oh yeah, no, I know. My mom always said talking about your writing is sometimes like talking about your sex life. I don't know. I talk about writing all the time, but they're both in a good place. So I'm okay. If I was just beginning something, I would be super vague and mysterious because I don't
Yeah.
like to break the spell. But
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
I'm
and
in the
sometimes-
rewrite phase on two things. So one of them is a Halloween story. Um, where when it's set is, we should talk about that writing during this crazy pandemic. Anyway, it's a Halloween novella that is one of a triptych. Lisa Morton and Lucy Snyder are writing the other two, and that's going to come out from Crystal Lake this coming Halloween.
Oh, nice.
And I set it in our neighborhood, which just has fabulous Halloweenness. And I called, there's a group of 6 friends, 2 of them my kids, who all trick-or-treated together over the years. And I asked them for their favorite Halloween stories. And so those are Easter eggs through it. So it was super fun to write. But the thing was, I was kind of setting it in the upcoming Halloween, so it would be contemporary, right? So I was like, okay, well, nobody's gonna be wearing masks outside. I decided all these things based on before Omicron. And now Omicron's here, and I'm like, we have no idea what the reality is going to be. So I'm actually going to have to set it in 2021's Halloween and put some masks on people and figure that part out. It is hard to write now. It's hard to know when,
Yeah, it is hard. It is hard to write. Because I do think that like right now, the way that things are will eventually change or settle into something that is sort of what the thing is, but we're still not there yet. And so, yeah, it makes it
and
very,
we felt like we were one place and now we're somewhere totally different. That's, yeah, in
and,
December.
and it seems awkward to completely ignore, at this point, because it's been so long, it seems awkward to like completely ignore the fact that like, things are different. And yeah, I'm struggling with like this. It's a work for hire project that I'm doing, and it's like there's like a contemporary aspect to it, and it's like set right now. But I'm like, but
What
we're
is
not
right now?
alluding to anything, and so I'm like, so in my, I just keep saying that it's 2023, because I figure like, well, things will be different in a different way, then. But yeah, it makes it difficult.
This, I asked some writers about that, and they were like, well, I won't mention the virus ever. And I'm like, well, that doesn't really work because we are in a new reality and everything has changed. And if you're doing something period, that's fine. And also I've heard from editors that it's rather annoying when someone talks about like a supply chain problem, but no one's wearing masks in the story. I mean, there are problems with inconsistencies.
Yeah,
So.
I just announced my new graphic novel, The Shifting Earth, that's coming out in June.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And one thing that I have in it, it's about climate change, and and it's set a little bit further into it's set in the near future. And and I have them wear masks sometimes and pull down masks, not because it's this, but because there's probably going to be more pandemics because of, but I just wanted it to be stitched in, especially in a comic book where like, it's visual, to be stitched in, that it's like just sort of a part of the fabric of life rather than the thing, that sort of defines.
Right. And that's how I thought too. It was like, there was one scene I was writing and she's going into a store and she realizes it's crowded. So she grabs her mask, things like that. I think that's kind of normal.
Can be
now.
part of the vernacular. Yeah, totally. But yeah, and I think at some point we will figure it out. But I do find it uncomfortable when I'm like watching television shows that are set now and like there's no mention that
crowded room.
Everything is it's just 2019 again. It's very weird. How do you figure out what you were going to work on? Oh, wait, did you have another thing that you were working on?
And so the other thing was something that I've sort of written for myself. It was very funny writing something that was part of the triptych because I actually had to come up with it within a couple months. I've never had that kind of deadline before, but we had something to go on. We agreed that it would be centered on a Halloween store and it had certain properties, and we all launched different stories from there. But this other one, I'm actually talking about specific setting. I set in the springtime of the first lockdown, because what really struck me about that was there was an article about how nannies were being asked to stay away from their families and live with the family that they were taking care of the child. That tripped me out. And so I've come up with a Gothic novella that's set at Wolf's Lair in Hollywood, and that's what I've been working on. And I'm getting that into shape for.
Great.
I'm really excited for the second layer of beta readers, and then I think I'll probably try to find a home for that. But that one was really fun, and that for me was easy because it's very specific, those early months of lockdown, what everything was like.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm thinking. Everything is going to be a certain date of historical knowledge, and so and you know, a lot more nonsense could happen, which is useful to me as a writer.
Yeah,
so that was the other thing.
That's a really good way of thinking of it, that there are sort of like these sort of phases of where we are now that could be good landscapes to write in. But the idea of contemporary, you know, just being this sort of general like thing that we always knew is still
every day.
Yeah. Okay, so now I'm going to go to the next question. How do you figure out what you're going to work on? Like, how do you figure out that it's a thing? This is my next thing. Like, I get a lot of different ideas or inspirations for ideas, and it's not necessarily the next thing that I'm going to write on. What's your relationship with that?
I think it really depends on where I am at the time. I definitely, because of the headiness of everything that went on in 2020, was having trouble. And also I just finished a novel that near broke me in a good way. I mean, it really was a huge effort. It took 5 years. It's centered on a love story told through the lens of Alzheimer's. So it was a little close to home. So I needed a break. And so I started working on shorts, and I started working on genre shorts, because genre shorts people pay you for. Literary ones you don't get paid for. Real simple. And so I started setting those in a slightly magical Los Angeles, because it's really important to me now that we have I don't know, I get frustrated by the slurs against Los Angeles perpetuated by many, many movies that we've seen. And it's so exciting to see series like Insecure show the real city. And so it was my goal in these to at least set it in the real city. And so sometimes it'll be an idea like that. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to do short stories, but I'm going to aim them all in one world so that eventually, you know, I could come up with a collection. I'll have, for a while, it was like, I need a new novel. And I would just go about until I came up with an idea. But I wrote like 4 or 5 of those. And so I'm sort of like taking a break now. But it's something that inspires me. That big 5-year novel that I wrote just came from, I was washing the dishes one day and I was dealing with my aging parents and my kids, and just, I was thinking about the breadth of life and how crazy it is. And I just felt enormously sad. The book is not enormously sad. It actually has much joy to it, but that idea of things folding in, I think, gave me like the starting point for that novel. But it's different every time. I feel like I have to teach myself how to do it all over again every time it comes up.
No, I agree. I mean, it is, you can't just say, this is always how I get an idea and this is where it comes from. It's so random sometimes. Like, it's just so, you know, just yeah, completely random and completely different every single time. And I never know whether or not I can pull it off every single time.
Well, and this started as a short story, and, you know, I wrote it and the story was complete, but it didn't have space to pack the emotional resonance it needed. And so I was like, well, this needs to be longer. And then when I was there's the option where, do you want to turn this into a novel? And I just thought that it would be too dark and hard if it were a novel. As a novella, it's a pretty swift read. And it's, I felt like we would have to get into all of the inner workings of the family and their various sibling issues. And it was going to be not the kind of book I wanted to spend years in, nor 300 pages reading. Right. I really wanted to read the 80-page version. So yeah, it's, you know, when you're in it too, it's like not just where the idea comes from, it's like what the project's going to become changes sometimes.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think that's a really great point. And I would love to write a novella at one point, because, but it's also like, that's like a hard space to kind of find a home for,
And yeah, it's not the biggest paying space that there is too. That is, because it is hard. Sometimes they'll be in a journal, sometimes they'll come out, and it's a weird space, but it's the most fun space gosh, revising a novella is so much more fun than revising a novel. It's so tidy.
Yeah.
It's so fixable. It's so you pull one thread and everything sort of pulls together in a beautiful way. It's super. I love revision, and it's like my favorite thing to revise.
Yeah, I love revision too. I feel like, I mean, I'm sure a million writers say this, and like, but for me, that's where the real writing is in revision. Okay, so next question is, and this is sort of multi-pronged. You can pick any part of it that you want, or whatever. But like, what is your process, your art process, or do you have a theory, like an art theory, and also, or what's the best art advice that you've gotten or that you've given?
That's a number of things.
Yeah, I know. It's a lot of questions in one.
Yeah. So my process, I have to say, is just sitting down and working at it, and just always making sure I have something. And so if I have one project I'm working on, to make sure that if I have other ideas, I've got them somewhere else on the desktop. So when I run into a wall in that one project, I can like go to something else. But I think the best advice is to keep at it. I think a lot of people set a lot of store by the muse hitting them. And I think that's when people run out of ideas and things. But if you think of it as a workspace, and you set yourself a certain times to sit down during a week, and I have people, students finishing novels, and they have full-time jobs, but you say, this is my writing time, and you keep at it. That's probably the best way to go, and just keep chipping away, and know that it's not going to be come out of your fingers like sunshine every time. Like, no writer sits down and things just come out gorgeous. I think that's another thing that people who haven't been at it long enough don't know, is that, like you said, the work is in revision. That's where the most of the writing gets. So the books that they admire and think are amazing, they believe come out in first drafts. And it's really important to know that writers have drafts. It's really instructive to read Raymond Carver's books short stories before Gordon Lish got to them, to read The Great Gatsby before Max Perkins got to it. They were unwieldy and messy, and that's the process of writing. So sort of keeping at it and making it better, and having faith in that.
Yeah, I've been really realizing that I'm a morning writer, and that if if I don't sort of start, even if I don't get to it like right away in the morning, but like I need like a wide berth of space until like 2 p.m. That's my sort of golden time. And if I have to take a break, or if I have to do something at noon or at 8 in the morning, my whole day is gone, because and so I'm really realizing that I'm trying to protect that time now, and try. I mean, it's hard with like international Zooms and things like that. It's like, I don't really, as a Los Angeles person, have like a lot of choice on time zone stuff. But I am trying to sort of be more vocal about saying, like, I'm a morning writer, so can we have this at least after 12, so that I can, at least get sort of like something done, because otherwise I feel like, it's all over. Like today,
it's away from you.
I had like a Zoom from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. And I think the thought is like, well, you've got the whole rest of the day to do, you're right. It's like, that's not how it works with me. It's like, I'm straight to the whiskey, like. So
I'm definitely a morning composer and an afternoon revisionist. I can revise in the afternoon, but composing, it needs to be in that clean space in the morning.
Yeah, agreed. I can do different things in the afternoon, like, but they're not that creative thing, so just trying to protect that. And that's something that's been hard for me to learn because of the muse thing. Do you know what I mean? It's like when the muse strikes or when it doesn't. I'm trying to learn how to like do it when the muse doesn't strike, but I'm also realizing I do have like a period of time where that, there's a good
where you're at your best. Yeah.
So do you have a theory about writing, or do you have or advice, or?
I think the thing that gets me down to the page every day, and I think it's a hurdle that people have to get over, because they have a lot of voices talking to them in their heads that are negative, is I just tell myself it can be crap and I can take it out later and I can change it later. And if I keep saying that to myself, I'll at least get words down. And again, like the work and the joy for me is in revision. So if I do get the words down and understand that it'll come out crummy some days when you feel like it's coming out crummy, and I've noticed this with my students, they were like, I don't know, it was so hard, I think this might be terrible. They've actually written something that's phenomenal. So like, not to think about, associate with how it feels when you're doing it with what the product is. Look at the product later, because often it's really good.
Yeah. And sometimes I can't even tell which parts I thought were terrible when I go back.
Right.
I'm like, oh God, I just wrote crap, crap, crap. And then like 3 days later, whatever, if I like go
That's
back
pretty
to
good.
the other thing, I'm like, which part did I think wasn't good? Like, it's actually not as awful as like I imagined.
I had one book I couldn't finish. It was driving me nuts. And like for a year and a half, I kept writing everything but the ending. And then I was like, look, I'm going to write the crappy ending. That's it. I'm just going to write it so I have something down to revise. And that ended up being the part of the book I changed the least.
Yeah.
Apparently the crappy ending was what I needed.
There you go. Yeah, that's amazing. What about advice? You're a teacher. Do you give advice? What advice do you give to your students? Or what's the best advice that you've given? Or
Yeah,
what?
pretty much. Yeah, pretty much that. I mean, it's because I think that where they trip themselves up is when they overthink, and they start thinking this stinks or judging it before they even get it out there. But to trust the process and to keep drafting forward. I always think of that guy in Camus' The Plague, who was writing the first sentence of his novel for the entirety of the quarantine. And like he kept changing a word and he never got past that first sentence. So, I tell them to draft and not to worry about the beginning of their book, because it's not going to know what it needs until they get to the end of it anyway.
Right.
Just sort of keep writing forward.
And what about, like, do you have any advice that Kit gave you, that your mom gave you, that you sort of is like a touchstone or anything?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, she gave me notes and stuff, but I can't say I think it's more because we were exchanging work back when I was writing screenplays, and she would send me her books, and it was like, it was more such a long conversation. I couldn't crystallize it into one.
Anything.
Yeah.
I feel like for me, your mom, like Kit's best advice was, be a good literary citizen, and so that's been something that I've really taken to heart, and and have taken the baton on for that.
One thing I did learn from her, which was really important, was it doesn't matter, what someone's fame level is. There's this notion that you need to socialize and like work the system and like befriend people in order to like make your business better. She just all the way through would find people who were her friends, and they would be your friends because of the people they were and not necessarily what they were working on. And all of that worked out, because she would put people together who needed to start things, literary magazines, but then they would later ask her for a story. Just being a good citizen in the world and being good to people is all you really need to do. The idea that you're trying to rub elbows with someone, and that doesn't exist in LA. That's why I like LA. There's that notion in New York, rub elbows with the important people and then you'll get somewhere. Yeah, so she was just really,
maybe that happens in Hollywood.
yeah, no, it didn't.
Yeah.
I was in the film business for a while. That definitely happened there.
Yeah,
Like,
but not
it
in
was
the literary. Yeah.
socializing with an end. But in LA, it seems like people are just people and being friends with each other and not trying to operate. And that's what makes it a really nice environment.
Yeah, for books. Yeah, for sure. Okay. All right. Pandemic. We've already talked about it, but let's talk about it a little more. Did you learn anything new during this time? Did you acquire a new skill? Did you
You mean what kept me sane?
Yeah, like, like what kinds of things were doing?
I spent a lot of time out in the garden. We were very fortunate. We had gotten all of our grass ripped out and some decomposed granite put down. So, and that was all finished January of 2020. And so the rest of the time, planting, weeding, all of that kept me very sane, as well as walking. So I don't know if it was a new skill. I think I definitely learned, when I started getting a little bit too doom scrolly, I would go out back and just work with stuff and notice that it was a beautiful day, which was, we definitely spent the pandemic in the right part of the world. We're very lucky here because for the most part, you could be outside every day. So touching base with like the planet and knowing that, you know, the natural environment was actually okay. You know, that everything, you know, in the garden was okay. That was sort of where I spent much of my time.
Yeah, I mean, I was glad that, you know, because there was a part of me that was like, oh, maybe I should go to Montreal and be there in Canada. Maybe Canada will fare better, which it didn't, than the United States, weirdly enough. But then it's also like you can't even go anywhere in Canada. So it was like, and that's what made me stay here, was my thought of like, yeah, I'm alone during the pandemic, but there's sun, the sun is here, the sun, I can be outside, and like, it's like I can, I was saying before about Barbricks, it's one of my little favorite restaurants in the neighborhood, and like in their enormous parking lot, they had tables like way farther away than like 6 feet, so it's like I felt safe there, and it was outdoors, and I could take a hike in Griffith Park in the middle of winter. And that was like that was a bonus of being in Los Angeles, which has its issues because it is a very isolating city, even without a pandemic. It's a very lonely city, Los Angeles, because it's so car dependent.
Well, and also it's not lonely when it's going great, because there are places where people gather and we count on that gathering.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
So when the gathering was taken away, it definitely became very, very lonely.
Yeah. Yeah, perfect. One thing that I did was also, I never really made it before, but I made a lot of banana bread. Like that was like one of the like sort of, things that I made a lot of. And I never buy banana bread. I don't want to have, like, if it's offered to me outside, like I'm like, no, I don't want that. But for some reason, I just like could not get enough of banana bread. I don't know if I'll ever make it again, but
I mean, we cooked really well because you didn't really have the choice and we were with our 2 grown children at home. So lots of hunger. So we all got really good at cooking. Co got amazing at almost takeout quality Chinese food, and he was watching all those YouTube videos. And Jack got very good at Thai food. And we would have every week, just for our sanity, when the air was clear, we would have a barbecue in the backyard and just kind of like pretend. But yeah, a lot more high quality cooking. Like I took time in the cooking and really enjoyed how the meal was brought together a lot more. It wasn't just procuring food.
Yeah. I definitely feel like I became a cook. Like, like I can whip up anything with any ingredients now. And I understand my pantry at this point. It's like, I get it now. I'm like, oh, this is how you organize a pantry. Like,
Yeah.
Okay. What is the one thing that you have done? And it could be any aspect of your career or any project. What is the one thing that you've done that you wish you had that had a little bit more love on it?
I was really lucky. My first book, Harrogate, like saw a lot of readers. So I was very lucky for that. So I think honestly, it's still this one, because it was launched during the pandemic. Because there were no like live events or going around to bookstores and things. I would love to see it get some more readers. It's very hard, I think, to sell an 80-page book without completely spoiling it. I had such a great experience with the Thing in the Labyrinth book club, which is a horror book club that used to be run out of the last bookstore that Ashley Santana's doing, because there were 8 people who'd read it and I could spoil it with and talk about all the details with. So I think, there's like a little worry for me that its time will pass and on to the next thing. So, yeah.
All right. Yeah, and I think people should read it because I think it's really great, and it's a like I said, like a sort of tender, monstrous read, and I think that and it's short read, I mean, it doesn't,
It's very much one sitting. And I
it's like
think
one tub, yeah, one tub, one
one
bath,
tub
one
or
bath.
one sit by the fire.
Yeah.
I had a lot of friends who I think were putting it off because, it is a thing when you read a friend's book, you want to dedicate time to it. And they were like, oh my God, I was done in like an hour. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, okay, so this question also can be about anything. What are you obsessing about right now? Any show or any,
Actually,
particular,
oddly enough, Duolingo.
really?
I'm
Okay, talk
yeah.
to me. Tell me. What
I
language?
I wanted to learn some Japanese. My goal is that the next time I go back to Japan, I'm not a terrible embarrassment to my family. The kids, it's funny because the kids actually have studied it, but when we first went to Japan, they were just laughing at my pronunciation, and I was the silly gringa. Oh, I guess we would say, anyway, it was. And so I've been working on Japanese, and I've also been working on Spanish. And it was funny, originally it's because I wasn't paying for it. And to rack up points to be able to keep moving on, you have to do well at something. So I started Spanish, which I'd taken 6 years of, and I would just go there to get hearts. So then finally I was like, I got to a point where I was not going to be learning, because anytime I made a mistake, I would get bumped off for the day. So I got a subscription, and now I'm pushing ahead in Spanish. And we get like my husband, Co and I get a little bit obsessive over, have I made it to the Diamond League, or am I going to drop out of the Diamond League, or how many points do I have for the day? I think it's our current, non-television associated obsession.
I think that's a really good obsession too, because it's like good for the brain and good for the heart and good for hopeful travels and like good for, like.
Yeah, I mean, I'm hoping there's, because, my father had Alzheimer's, my mom had a brain tumor. There's part of me that hopes it keeps things sharp. Learning hiragana. Japanese is insane. It's got two alphabets, hiragana and katakana, and then half of it's in kanji, which is just like, the character that means a word. So there's a lot to learn, and I just keep stabbing at it because I'm the kind of person who learns by absorption. I'm not very good with memorizing vocabulary. So yeah, it's fun. And so now everybody like went on Wordle, and I was like, no, I think if I'm hunched over my phone, it's got to be Duolingo.
I mean, the only thing about Wordle is that it's like it's one and done for the day. It's like there's no there. You can't really sort of keep at it because you got to wait 24 hours. But yeah, maybe I should do Duolingo. I mean, I speak French fluently, but I have like the spelling level of like a fourth grader,
I
like.
remember I grew up with a friend whose mom spoke nothing but French, and so she was fluent, but she was in French 1 with me, and
Yeah.
it looked like gobbledygook to her because of all the things that are not pronounced.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's the one nice thing about like, my iPhone is that like I have the French dictionary on there too. So when I write someone in French, at least it puts the accents and sort of, like kind of, I know I'm still wrong, but it's like it looks a little bit more sort of put together.
If you watch ads, you can do Duolingo for free, and it's fun for that. And then you get frustrated and angry, but then it's only like $80 for the whole year. So as subscriptions go, not too bad.
Maybe I'll do that. Maybe learn a little Italian. I don't know,
Right?
That's like, maybe I should, since I never met Grandpa Castellucci, so Italian wasn't part of my language stuff. Like maybe I should.
And I heard from a friend who's done it that she did Italian for like years on Duolingo, and then went to Italy, and they said that she spoke more like a native than people who had like really studied it in classrooms, because it's conversational.
Yeah, great, good. All right, now I'm going to have a new obsession. That's what this is all about. Okay, if you weren't a writer, if this wasn't the kind of art that you would sort of put your path in, is there another kind of artist or creative career?
That's a really good question. When I was 15, I really wanted to be a costume designer. I was obsessed with Edith Head. I had a sewing machine. I sewed my prom dresses. I love the drawings. My parents got me a subscription to Vogue. So perhaps that, although my grown-up self would not want to be in that business, our cousin actually was in it, and it's not a pleasant place to be. But yeah, that would probably be the art.
I love
I'm
that.
terrible sewer. I mean, I'm not like I'm not very crafty with it. You saw like the skirt I did for you is a little
Yeah, I was
wonky.
like, wait, you made me a skirt. Yeah.
A little wonky. My sewing is, because I never took, I was very ambitious with, I think you have such a huge ego when you're a teenager. You're like, I don't need lessons because I'm an artist, you know? So I never properly learned sewing. But, you know, I did teach the kids to like sew a button and hem pants, so they never have to pay for that in their life. But aside from that, I'm not very
But
accomplished.
I do think that it's really interesting that like you were sort of drawn to that, you know, I think one of the reasons why I'm sort of asking this question is because I think the kinds of things that that you know we could that we loved, that we could, that we, you know, that was sort of like a passion of ours in that way, does inform the kind of artist that that we are now, you know, like and I bet you, I would wager that there is something about your love of costumes that has made it its way into your work.
Oh, definitely. My first non-genre novel is set, you know, it's a woman who works for Edith Head.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, and I could get into the process of sewing because at least I had put together a very complicated dress with whale bones and things. So I understood, you know, enough of the language to be able to make that look good. So yeah, things make their way in, like cooking is always makes its way in. I had one novel that, I think it was that novel, when a friend was like, you know, not everybody can cook. You can't have all your characters able to cook well. It just doesn't work that way. I was like, oh yeah.
Well, in my world, they do.
Right.
Yeah, I never thought about that. I mean, I was obsessed with films, right? I thought I was going to become the world's greatest filmmaker. That was my sort of path. And my first novel, Boy Proof, like she's obsessed with films, you know, films and comic books. You know, it's like, I think like there is something about that, that sort of other thing that you kind of get sort of giddy about, that's not your thing, that you can really enjoy, does, you know.
And you can get into your character's giddiness in a way that's fun for the reader too. Yeah.
Okay, well, those are all of my questions. So I would like to ask you now, where can people find you on the internet?
That's very easy. It's always my name. So katemaruyama.com for my website, at Kate Maruyama for Twitter, and at Kate Maruyama for Instagram. And I feel really bad because I only met Kate Maruyama of DC after she started getting my emails, and I felt like I took all those, although like the website, she doesn't have it. Anyway, she does have Kate Maruyama for her email address, which I do not. Yeah, pretty easy to find in those places. And I'm mostly, I think, on Instagram these days. I'll tweet articles and things that I find that are interesting, but I don't like dwell there.
Great. Kate, thank you so much for
nice to hang out with you, Cecil. Thank you.
So good to see you, and thank you so
much. It sucks not to hug.
I know, and
I remember our first vaccinated hug was like one of my first, you know, friend hugs after the pandemic, and I started crying.
I know. Yeah. But thank you, and thank you for your art heart, and for, you know, for being such a good friend. I'm so glad that we had that play date.
Yes, I'm glad we did too. I think you guys hung out for like 3 hours. I mean, it was pretty absurd, but I definitely knew I had found a kindred soul.
I love it. Okay, well, thank you. I'm going to stop the recording now.
Okay.